Hello and welcome back to this episode of Chitty Chats. Today I will be interviewing the author of the debut book Z-Isms, Insights to Live by Matthew Zinman. And so I will let Matthew take it away. So obviously today we're going to be talking about your debut, Z-Isms, Insights to Live By.
Yeah.
And you probably get asked this quite a lot, but what is a Z-ism?
So it's funny because here in the States we say Z, but everywhere else in the world it's Z.
That's true.
So it's like, oh, it's Z-isms here, but I pay heed. But no, it's we're talking about those insights that everyone has that they gain through their lives, the pearls of wisdom, through experiences, things that they might say to others for advice, guiding principles for themselves. It's not a book of quips and quotes and things like that. It is a full-fledged book, but that's the driving factor, and these are insights to live by that everyone has that to positively impact as many people as possible.
And why did you sort of decide to write this particular book in regards to it being, close to personal development?
Well, it's definitely something I've been wanting to write for a long time. And I've, through my experiences as an entrepreneur, a single dad, I'll just, everybody's been through their own ringer, as they say, in life. And there are certain concepts and things that I have found very beneficial that I've wanted to get into a book format. And this past year, I really started to consider, my son has entered college, so I started to get a little bit more free time. And what would it be that I would regret not doing?
Mm-hmm.
And it was like the book was like, okay, I got to get this done. So I started writing about a year ago, and it's finally here. Now I'm just psyched to have the opportunity to talk to you.
That's amazing. So in terms of the influences for writing, is that your own personal experiences, having to be a single parent?
Right. Yeah, for the most part, there are, I'm in my early 50s now.
Oh,
So
wow. You
I
don't
guess,
look it.
well, that's why I'm telling you. I mean, we got to start out with the positives. I've definitely been into personal development, in my 20s, in my early 30s, but I can't claim to say that I've, consuming a lot of those books right now, in even recent decades at this
Mm-hmm.
point. So I kind of wrote this a little bit in a vacuum from my life experiences, but part of it is also I'm running a nonprofit since 2007 that I founded called the Internship Institute. So here in the States, same, internships, apprenticeships, all things that are work-based learning. So I do have the opportunity to work with a lot of young people. I've had over 300 and counting interns, apprentices myself.
Oh, wow.
And there are just any number of aspects of there being no substitute for experience, and some things that I guess part of that book is influenced by, what I wish my younger self knew,
Yeah.
going into the professional world and things like that. And it cuts across areas of self-discovery, relationships. I've been married. I've been around that block a couple of times. I'm remarried now. And then we get into mindfulness and life enrichment. So to answer your question, if there were any influences, I would say Malcolm Gladwell would be one on the front end of the book, and then Rhonda Byrne of The Secret
Yeah.
would probably be the other. That's probably an odd cross, but that's what comes to mind.
Okay. And in terms of you mentioned the apprentices that you've taken on, aside from those individuals that would benefit from reading your book, who else would you say would benefit from reading your book?
Well, it really it cuts across the board. I think anybody who is in any kind of transition, for one, whether that's with their career because of all the experience that I'm incorporating in the book with that, It could be relationships. It could
Mhm.
be, the point I am in life with, I don't know, do you call it the empty nest where you are? The empty nest syndrome is the
Yeah, I
term when you're,
suppose. Yeah.
really, if you've heard that. And my wife and I mean, she has a daughter who's 15, so, not completely out, but I was really also looking to, well, I just, just to finish the answer to your question, I really think it's a book that anybody's going to get a benefit out of if they're into personal development, or just any kind of, you know, aspect of self-improvement. They're looking for some new perspectives. I think it's all there. And a big part of it for me was to make it practical so that there's a life enrichment action plan that is the outcome of reading the book and going back, and provides this like 90-day framework that people can follow in like real manageable steps.
Right.
So
And I think one thing I read was you've sort of described your book as having these original insights. Could you sort of characterize those
sure.
for us?
Sure. So the beginning of the book is a chapter called Earned Confidence, which is something that really provides that foundation, and the book builds on itself throughout. So it's referred to not just in chapter one. And Earned Confidence is basically that simple logic that wherever we are in our lives, we've all been through all the things that we've been through, and we're still fine. We've made it through everything. And it sounds so simple, but at the same time, it's easy to lose sight of, I can make it through anything because that's what I've always done. And instead, people get caught up in worry and anxiety and stress, some of the things like making assumptions. So Earned Confidence is a lot about staying present, gratitude. That's probably, in part the
Yeah.
Rhonda Byrne influence, um, and breaking the habit of worrying. Babies aren't born worry. That's something that you acquire through life, and you really have to untrain yourself. So it's just a very logical reminder, just to be kind to yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of, let's say, transferring that kind of what's taught in the book, would you say it's easy to kind of translate that into real life, if that makes sense? I don't know if that.
Yeah, it's written very practically. The style of the book is as if I'm having a personal conversation with the reader. So there are some reflective questions throughout that, some will find might resonate more than others. For example, right after, to your last question, Earned Confidence is a chapter called Be Aware of Spiders. And this is more of a cautionary chapter. It's the one I almost didn't include in the book. It's like, which one of these isn't like the others? But it's the one I'm hearing a lot about. So I'm glad I did. And this is a Malcolm Gladwell influence. You're talking about how we have all these moving parts in our lives and within ourselves, with our relationships, and it's hard to stop those moving parts in certain ways. And Gladwell talks about thin slicing, which is finding that data point, that this or that, that will help you make a decision about things. And so when we talk about spiders, we're talking about manipulators. So there's two kinds of people in the world. There are spiders, and there are people who get caught in webs. And the reason why it's a this or a that is because true manipulation is a conscious decision. You're somebody who will either do that or you won't do that. And if you are somebody, I do believe this is a minority of individuals, you are, putting mental energy into whatever you're doing to try and impose your will to have others have theirs bend to yours, versus I give the benefit of the doubt to everybody. I always think of the good of people. It doesn't necessarily make somebody a bad person. It's not like that's all they do. It might be 1% of the time. It might be they would never do that to their family or their best friends,
Right.
but that character trait is very defined. And I think that as I guess when they hear that, the readers are immediately, I don't know if you're identifying with, oh, right, yeah, I get it. There are, it's kind of a one or the other type thing.
Oh, it
And
definitely resonates. Yeah, absolutely.
so that was some hard living that went into that, Mel, to that chapter. So yeah, so that, those are a couple examples. Another would be that, there's some, in terms of the personal conversation throughout the book, there are a number of disclosures, one of which is that I've had to contend with depression since my early teens.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
And well, I mean, a lot of people do.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I didn't get the best gene pool. I mean, my dad was bipolar, my mom was a depressive.
Oh, wow.
There's a lot of aspects of that I also think apply in the here and now, as people are a little bit more out of their structure and more susceptible to depression. I feel like, for so long now, people dance around this topic as if, the brain is something apart from the body when it comes to mental health. And I wanted to take it head on. And there are a number of different original tools and graphics and things throughout the book. So in this chapter, which is not quite halfway through, called Minding the Mood Scale, there's like a thermometer type scale where you have that middle range of whatever you want to call normal, right? Normal,
Yeah.
happy, normal, sad. But if you're somebody who's ever experienced depression, I really think at some level everyone does. It doesn't have to be a clinical chemical imbalance of some sort. You're just gonna get into those lows. There are some practical things that I've learned to do through my life to take care of myself. Because if I didn't disclose that, people would probably never think it. I'm like,
So by bringing,
right,
because that's one thing that I've done as well with my podcast, is I brought some of my personal experience into that.
right.
And what was your main sort of motivation for doing that? Was it to empower people, I suppose?
Well, I feel like, number one, I wanted the book to be practical, and so, those life experiences and things that I've learned in terms of self-care come into play. And I didn't think it was right for me to put a personal development book out and have it be that kind of a tone in terms of that conversation, and not put myself out there. There are a number of personal disclosures, and along these lines, I lost my brother to suicide, in terms of his challenges with it. And so it's very close to my heart. Thank
Mhm.
you. That was 2012. And so, from a practical standpoint, when, for me, if everyone's going to have a down day, it could be the weather, it could be just something happens, you get a punch when you're an entrepreneur, you're going to get punched in the gut like about 4 times a week,
Yeah.
just however hard that's going to be, something's going to happen. But if I get to a third day, I have to take action, because it's like sinking in the quicksand. And if you sink too deep, it just becomes that much harder to get out. So for me, that's day 3. And that means I can't lay around. I have to create structure for myself. That could be a to-do list. Working out is certainly part of it. Reaching out to people and, you know, getting lifted up by the people who, lift you up with positive energy. And those are all proactive steps that you have to take. I mean, they're coping skills. You can say, well, I
Absolutely.
listen to music, or I do other things, but that's what you have to do, is you have to take action.
That's very important. I do like that. One thing you also mentioned was the number 1111, which I found really, again, resonated with me, because I seem to see those numbers quite often.
Yeah, there's that whole section of synchronicity, and we're back into that law of attraction area. So I kind of group those chapters together. One's called Swimming with the Current, and it's about trusting your gut. Some of that has to do with relationships. That's another
Mhm.
part of it. And then I also have some fun with making coincidences matter. And that the more I feel like I'm in the flow, the more I experience those different
Yeah.
kinds of coincidences, also rooted in gratitude. But yeah, 1111's been like that trigger for me. Um, really anything having to do with synchronicity, things that you kind of fold into your day, seeing something on the digital, on the clock or whatever. And that's also the practical aspect of gratitude, is embedding it, looking for those things. So I do have a gratitude exercise I do when I see 1111. Here in the States, I think, or it could be worldwide, but kids look to that to make a wish, or something along those
Yeah.
lines. Uh,
You're supposed to think only good things, I think, on 11/11, or things that you want to attract, isn't it?
yeah, oh, absolutely. I mean, my wife is also a veteran, so we celebrate Veterans Day on November 11th every year. Our wedding anniversary is 11/11.
Oh, wow.
So that was no coincidence. That's how much I like 11/11. We literally planned to do that. So that then takes you into the amplifying gratitude,
Hmm.
and the chapter on law of attraction. And the one thing that I want to point out there is, whether you believe in it or not, or for my point, it's still there if it's there. And I summarize it as, well, what you expect tends to happen. So it then reflects back to earned confidence and not worrying, because worry is an expectation around what it is you don't want to happen. So
Absolutely.
if you believe in the law of attraction and you're a worrier, you're contradicting yourself. And like I tell people, don't worry about me, because you'll get me hurt
Yeah.
in that
Oh, I
way.
like that.
So if that's the application, then there might be some truth to that. So I'd rather not chance it.
Absolutely. And what about, because I know there is also a chapter on elements in motion. Is that similar to?
Yeah, Elements in Motion is a very specific chapter about an experience I had in Big Sur, California. And there's a place there called Esalen, which is very much like a commune. And a friend of mine was working there, and I went out to visit her. And during the days while she was working, one of the things that they do on the at the property is they have these different classes. Now this is back about 15, 20 years ago. And so there was this intensive course that I took about the mind-body connection, and they related it to the elements, where it was in 4 quadrants. Again, this is another illustration in the book, but easy enough to visualize how on the bottom you have earth and water,
Mm.
water to the left, which is considered backward, and earth to the forward on the right. And then in the upper quadrants, you've got fire to the right and air to the left. So on one hand, it's like a personality model, where it talks about how everyone has some innate characteristic. Like a type A personality would be fiery.
Okay.
Right? Someone who maybe we would call a surfer, like a surfer dude, as we would say here. That would be an airy person. Things roll off your shoulders. Whereas if you're water, you're kind of like a little bit more of a pushover. You're somebody who is more easily, basically you're a pushover. And then earth is someone who's very grounded, and isn't necessarily going to push, but can't be pushed, kind of as if they're rooted by a tree. So there are these different personality models that everyone hears about through life, but this is the one that stuck with me. But what I really like about it, and one of the ways it really helped me, is especially in my younger days, when it comes to, let's say, being in a potential argument, and one person thinks that they're right, the other person thinks that they're right, and it's hard to get your ego out of your way.
Hmm.
And instead you're well, in that moment, do I really want to go through 3 days of angry emails or text messages and be talking to all my friends about how this happened or anything? Or can you spare yourself in the moment, that instead of being fire, and when you say, well, fire plus fire is just going to make more fire that's going to combust, that even though I'm not a water type person, in that circumstance, I can douse those flames. I can get my ego out of my way by recognizing, like, you know what, it's not really worth it, even though I know I'm right. but two rights don't necessarily make either person wrong in terms of how perception shifts, and we talk about that earlier in the book as well. But the lesson for me was I can, in that moment, be more the tree, just ground myself and be, what, I'm going to yield on this, knowing that it's more worth it to me to spare myself and
Hmm.
and everyone from the fallout um, of igniting that situation. So that's a lot about what that chapter covers.
So, in other words, although I might be naturally a water sign, or so a pushover, was that the one, right? But
Right,
I
yeah.
can still make changes in that particular moment to suit that particular situation.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And not only that, but you have an innate quality, and then through life experience, you might change qualities. You might be someone who is more water, who learns to be a little bit more assertive and be more earth-like, or let things roll off your shoulders instead of taking them personally. Or you could be a fiery person. As I would say, in my younger days, I might have been considered a little bit more fiery.
Yeah.
I certainly have that fuel, but I have a maddening amount of patience, as I'm told by certain
Yeah.
people. So I really do gravitate toward that earth. It's kind of emotional intelligence
Yeah,
is really,
absolutely.
right. There's so these crossovers, but that is the model that just resonates with me, and it's just really clean. And it's not like I go around Mel and be like, oh well, she's fire, and he's
Yeah.
earth. But in a circumstance, it's a great way to remind yourself to just plant yourself and make a conscious decision, instead of letting a situation or something else get carried away. Like
Absolutely.
in the example of the spider chapter, and you talk about, well, one of the reasons or ways that that might affect you is if you're someone who has a hard time saying no.
Hmm.
Because if that's the case, chances are that there's a double hit there. You're not saying no, and then you feel terrible about what it is that you end up not saying no to, and that person might be knowing that you're susceptible to being manipulated in that way. And you can make a decision to stand up for yourself, even though that you have a tendency to have a hard time saying no, and again choose to be something other than water in order and build your self-esteem that way. So
Absolutely. And in many of the chapters within Z-Isms, they sort of build upon one another and emphasize the notion of self-care, and culminate that with having these enriching experiences. Could you sort of tell me
right.
more about that?
Right. So there is a combination in the middle of the book. In part, we talked about mood health, and that certainly is not exclusive of the physical health.
Yeah.
And there's being a life athlete is what that chapter is about. And I certainly did not invent the guiding principles of self-care, but I did develop a tool called a self-care report card that's a really easy way to keep yourself accountable, to say, well, did I work out 3 times a week? Did I get enough sleep? And then it also covers, obviously, diet and hydration, but then minimizing stress
Yeah.
is kind of the hidden one that people you can easily overlook in terms of their well-being. So there's a weighting to scoring those different aspects of self-care, and just you're not going to be effective if you're not at your best with your
Yeah.
health. So that's that's certainly part of it. It certainly also gets back to gratitude and remaining present, and that's really where you're going to experience the true joy in life, by internalizing and in that moment experience. And what are some of the things that you can do, again, like embedding gratitude in your life, whether that's you catch 11:11, or you set reminders on your phone to say, I'm just going to take a minute four
Yeah.
times a day and bring myself back into the moment, and think of something that really you can feel good about.
Also, with regards to, because I know you mentioned about joining an exclusive forum, and with regards to reminding ourselves of these things, I think, would you say that joining the forum would be useful in sort of reinforcing those habits?
Yeah, it really comes back to your first question that Z-isms, Z-isms are, it's not about me. It's in that way the book has no ending, where the readers are invited to join the forum, share their insights to live by, and just build a community to learn from each other. And since you and I actually originally spoke, I've made the decision in recent weeks I'm going to start a podcast.
Oh, fantastic.
And as an extension of that forum, and it will be called Insights to Live By, and it'll be inviting guests. I'll do some solo shows, but it will invite guests, and I could turn the tables and ask people about some of their guiding principles and mantras and the like in life that they found useful.
I love that, Matt. When is that due to be released?
I am fast on the learning curve right now
Okay.
in my own personal growth, and that and video on social media would be my two current um, things that I'm working on most. I have loosely set a deadline by the end of June that I will have that launched. And
Amazing.
the other thing with the book is I've been talking about it like, well, I want to positively impact as many people as possible, and that's naturally, obviously true, right? I don't have a coaching business. I didn't write the book to be like my calling card of sorts in that way. I wrote it to benefit people in reading it, but I wanted to be more specific. So I've also decided to put out that I want that to be 100 million people by 2025.
Wow.
And so the podcast is also an extension. I don't know if I have 100 million people hearing the podcast.
Well,
but
hopefully you do. 1111.
1111, yeah, exactly. It'll increase that reach.
Amazing. And aside from this project, are there any other books that you're intending to write, or any that you're currently writing at the moment?
No, it's funny. I put everything I had into this one. There might be at some point a version of it for the colleges and universities to be embedded integrated into the curriculum. I would probably write a few other chapters and maybe pull a couple that are. I'm not sure law of attraction would be taught in school, and
Right.
and there's some of the chapters beyond that called inevitability, which kind of builds on amplifying gratitude. And then I would substitute a couple things for what I've learned through my years in the internship and apprenticeship world to help guide people into their careers. So other than that, Mel, I'd say, check back with me in about 10 years, of life. And between now and then, I imagine there might be another one that comes about. But for now, it's all in here.
And where can we buy Z-Isms?
So it's easy enough to find on Amazon. Z-Isms.
Z-Isms. Sorry.
Same letter, right? It's easy enough to find. Insights to Live By. The reviews have been very kind, and whether on Amazon or I have a website, which is Z-isms.com. And in both places, you'll find the front end of the book as a sample. And all I could hope for is that anyone interested would go and read the free sample, and they'll know if they want to keep reading.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Matt.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, Mel.
No worries. It's been lovely. It's lovely to meet you.
Likewise.
So there you are, guys. That was the interview with Matthew Zinman, the author of the debut book, Z-Isms or Z-Isms, Insights to Live By. And I have to say, it was a pleasure to have Matthew on Chitty Chats. I feel that a lot of the things that was discussed really resonated with me as an individual herself on a spiritual development journey. This was definitely very insightful. And I have ordered my book from Amazon and I cannot wait to read it. Anyway, that is it for today. Stay tuned for the next episode of Chitty Chats.
We in? Like we're in the
Yeah,
podcast now?
we're
Okay. Well, you
boom.
jumped. Okay.
Thank you for coming on. It's absolutely fine.
I'm in Philadelphia.
Oh, there we go.
It's just this thing called the on switch. Okay.